we're at the end of, coming up on the end of chapter 5, when we ended our time last week. And so we'll pick up there. We'll finish up chapter 5 definitely tonight, and then at least get started on chapter 6. And you may recall again that chapter 6 is a very long chapter. It makes up the bulk of the book, which is Bonhoeffer's extended discussion of um, the Sermon on the Mount as found in Matthew. So if there are no questions about kind of where we ended up last week, we can go ahead and jump in to the last part of chapter 5, where we're on chapter some between page 62 and 63 for those that have the particular book that we're working from, or a particular version of discipleship that we're working from. And so just a little bit of recap. So this is the chapter entitled Discipleship in the Individual. And so Bonhoeffer is making this case that that the connection with Jesus initially is very individual. It's just us and Jesus. Jesus calls us individually. And in many ways, this call is to separate us so that our focus is on Jesus. It doesn't, and we'll talk here in a minute, it doesn't necessarily stay that way. But the initial call that comes from Jesus on all of our lives is a very specific, individual, and frankly, isolating interaction. And we kind of see that throughout the Bible. When we look at theophanies, whether it's Isaiah in the temple, um, whether it's Moses, the burning bush, mm, Samuel, as he hears God's voice and goes and asks Eli for advice, and Eli tells him, no, go back and just answer the voice. Here I am, your servant is listening. So you have these calls of God in very specific ways that are very intensely personal. You can even think about Paul's interaction with Jesus on the road to Damascus, and how to, everybody heard the voice, but only he understood it. The encounter with Jesus on the road was very specific for him, very intentionally isolating, even in the way of him not being able to see. So his senses were dulled so that he could, pay more attention to what Jesus was saying. Now, he wasn't completely left alone to fend for himself, because as you know, Ananias prayed for him and regained his sight. But again, the initial interaction is an individual one. It's us and God, us and Jesus, in a very intimate and powerful interaction. And so then Bonhoeffer even goes further to say that's necessary because we have to understand that all of our interactions are to be mediated through Jesus. So we have this interaction with Jesus. Jesus calls us, we say yes, we are obedient to the call. And now Jesus is in the middle of all our interactions, kind of the lens through which we see everything now. Um, and so on the top of page 62, it says, ever since Jesus called, there are no longer natural, historical, or experiential, unmeditated, excuse me, unmediated relationships for his disciples. Christ, the mediator, stands between son and father, between husband and wife, between individual and nation, whether they can recognize him or not. So this understanding, at least from Bonhoeffer's point of view, is that once we answer the call to Jesus, to follow Jesus, then Jesus is with us in all things, but not simply with us, but the mediator of all of our interactions. Everything that we do is now mediated through the person of Jesus. And so for a disciple of Jesus, and this is on 63, Bonhoeffer says, God-given realities, quote unquote, exist only through Jesus Christ. Um, it goes on further to say that no human way leads from person to person. The most loving sensitivity, the most thoughtful psychology, the most natural openness do not really reach the other person. There are no psychic immediacies. So again, the disciple of Jesus, um, there are no immediate connections with anything. It's all mediated through the person of Christ. Um, and so he goes on to say that that is why intercession is the most promising way to another person, and common prayer in Christ's name is the most genuine community. So, so the fact that the relationship with everything is now mediated through Christ, when we intercede for others, for each other, that's the most genuine way to be connected. Because again, there's a very specific, intentional, focused going to God for someone else. So when we think of someone, we pray for them. Again, in Bonhoeffer's understanding of discipleship, that's the purest connection that we can have, because again, it's directly through Jesus. We're not trying to do it ourselves. We're not trying to use some other mediating influence or channel. It's through Jesus. And so when we're thinking of others in prayer, and in corporate prayer, that connection is again in Bonhoeffer's thought, is the purest that it can be. Um, and so there is no genuine love for the world except the love which God has showed the world in Jesus Christ. 1 John 2:15, do not love the world, but then John 3:16, but God so loved the world. And so everything comes through God. At first glance, I would be like, well, this is weird. Um, I need to have direct interactions. Why would the love that I have for people, or the service that I render to people, or the connection that I have with people need to be mediated through anything. I can do this. But in terms of discipleship, in terms of following Christ, we are focused on Christ as our as the highest good, as our only real responsibility. And then it's as we focus on Christ, and then Christ is, moving with us, directing our thoughts and our patterns and our interactions. Then as we're focused on Christ, then Christ um, gives us the right perspective for our interactions. Um, and we might have experienced this, sometimes when we try to make things work in a relationship with someone, or we try to make things work in a particular situation, and we're working off of our own strength and our own creativity and our own cleverness, and it just doesn't seem to work out. We've done everything just so, we've planned it out, we've talked to the right people, we've done the right things, and it doesn't work. And oftentimes we'll say, God, what, why didn't it work? Or we'll blame various entities for not having done what they're supposed to do, or somebody acting against us. But oftentimes, if we are have the perspective correct, or at least we are working at whatever we're working at through Christ, then some of the things that we might have struggled with or might have derailed things now come into place, or things that caught us or stopped us, barriers that we couldn't overcome, seem to be less insurmountable or even go away, when we're realizing or figuring out that we're actually doing all of this um, by the action of Jesus, or mediated through Jesus. So it's not us trying to figure it all out and do it all. Obviously, we have agency. Obviously, we have to put in effort, all these sorts of things, but it's all mediated through Christ, and then Christ, kind of smooths out the rough edges, or fills in the places that we might not have even be aware needed to be handled, because again, it's all mediated through Christ. Um, and so, breaking these immediate relationships is mandatory. It's inevitable. It has to happen if we're going to follow, if we're going to be disciples. So I'll stop there for a second and see if there are any questions, comments about kind of this understanding of the immediacy of our connections being broken by the interceded by, or mediated by Christ.
I'm going to ask a silly question.
Mhm.
If you don't believe in Christ, you can't get to God. If
You
everything
can't
has
get
to
to
be,
God?
yeah, if everything has to be
Hmm.
mediated by Christ.
Hmm. Right. Now, I mean, he does say earlier though that it's mediated through Christ, whether we see it or not. Where is that? Just whether they can recognize him or not. This is on page 62. That, ever since Jesus called, all of these interactions are mediated by Christ, whether we realize it or not. And then Jesus says, no one comes to the Father except through me. So there's an understanding of kind of this exclusivity of Jesus. Now the question really ultimately becomes, does Jesus come in, present himself in the same form for everybody? So like if you're a Buddhist, is there a Christ-like um image or way to the Father? If you're a Hindu or Muslim or Baha'i or Native American, all of these various belief systems, um, is there a way that Christ is present? I would say yes. Do we understand it? I would say no, or at least I don't. But I think that there is a universality of the presence of Christ that is not necessarily specific to the person of Jesus of Nazareth. Um, but that gets into some murky territory, and some people will call me a heretic for saying that. But yeah, that's kind of where I am on that. Helpful? Not
Father,
helpful.
is there a possibility that whether the person believe or not, uh, um,
Hmm.
he's present anyway?
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think that's a perfect way to put it. I think you're spot on there. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes, when we kind of think back on situations that we've been in, um, we don't realize until after the fact, oh, Jesus was there. I didn't recognize him. I didn't realize it. I missed it, or I was too focused on this or overwhelmed by the situation that I didn't realize until then we look back and we're like, oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. So I would agree with you very much, very strongly. Ms. Curtis, thank you.
But Father Womack, isn't
Yes, ma'am.
it once we were baptized into Christ,
Hmm.
we become followers of Jesus Christ. And we are
Hmm.
referred by Christians or believers.
Hmm.
For us, for other religion, yes, we don't know their part of, how they connect to Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
But I feel there is one
Hmm.
creator for everyone.
Hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. I would agree. Yeah. I mean, because even in I think is it John 14? Um, where Jesus says, I have sheep in another fold that you don't know about, and I'm going to come and we'll all be one flock because there'll be one shepherd. So there's even an understanding in the gospel that there are other ways or other people that have entered into relationship with Jesus in a different way. But like you said, you're again right on that, that there's the one creator that created everybody, everything. That that there are that wants all creation to understand the level of concern and love and care that that birthed everything. um, and so there's that connection, whether it's specifically named, Jesus, or any particular deity, that it's a connection with that being that created all life. Yeah. Okay. And welcome back, Miss Kalama.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, I mean, this kind of touches on it, and thanks for raising this, Ms. Gaskin, because I mean, this kind of touches on, one of the struggles that Christianity has had, over the millennia is, whether it's through colonialism or other kind of, power structure that we, have Christians have tried to force people into believing, or have demonized them because they don't believe in Jesus, or have killed people because they won't convert or won't confess Jesus as Lord. And you know, and that's been defended by historians and those that might even still want to do it, but that doesn't line up with who God is. And then so if someone decides not to convert, or says they don't believe in Jesus, or don't believe that Jesus is the Christ, what do we do? What do we say to those individuals? How do we interact with them? How do we continue to live the truth that we understand? Jesus is the Christ, and we are his followers, and but how do we reconcile that? Some of it is, on a very very flip way to answer that would be, that's not that's above our pay grade. How God figures that out is how God figures that out. We don't know, and it's, not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily matter to what we are to be doing. We're to be preaching the gospel, sharing the gospel, loving people, to the best of our ability, and to do that doesn't require them to convert. I'm put in the mind of a friend, former parishioner who used to work with refugees. Um, and there was a story that was told of a woman that was raised Muslim, didn't know anything about Christianity, but had a really, really powerful experience with some Christians that were helping her to resettle, as a refugee here in the States. And and she said, I don't know anything about this Jesus person, but if this Jesus has caused you to be as kind and helpful to me as you have been, I want to know more about him. So it's, there's a real work that we are involved in to live, very holy, helpful, loving lives that that kind of compel people, or at least make people curious to find out, well, why would you do this for me? You're from this place, you're a Christian. Why would you go out of your way to help me, a Muslim? I'm an immigrant, and most of the people that I've come in contact with don't want to help me. They're scared of me, or they think I'm trying to take their job, or their way of life, or whatever the case is. But you, even though you don't believe like I do, you want to help me. You want to provide what I need. And when we do things like that, those are the kind of examples that we live. Again, to get kind of back to Bonhoeffer's language, that are mediated through Christ, so that the barriers and the obstacles that we might normally put up, whether it's fear or um, or suspicion, or whatever other negative we can think of that would separate us from other people, when we see them through the lens of Christ, when the relationship and the interaction is mediated through Christ, we begin to see them as human beings, also created in God's image and likeness by that one creator. Ms. Collingmore mentioned that now we want to do the best we can for them, because um, similar to the golden rule, so-called, or the summary of the law, love God with all of our heart, mind, body, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so when our interactions are mediated through Christ, then we begin to be able to set aside whatever the obstacles are, and really be present with and for them, like we would be present with and for people of our family, or people that we love and know well. And that's kind of where Bonhoeffer is leading, is that when all of our interactions, everything we do is mediated through Christ or seen through the lens of Jesus, then we realize, you know, how important it is to be present with all of the people that we come in contact with in, you know, in a loving and peaceful and merciful way, because that's how Christ lived, and that's what Christ expects. And if we're going to be disciples and follow Jesus, that's what we're expected to do too. And so we really work on again focusing on Jesus, focusing on Christ, so that we are seeing everything through God's eyes, as it were. We're able to adjust our anxiety, our fear, our worry, and even our anger to a certain extent through now this interaction with Christ, this looking at Christ and then looking at the world through Christ's eyes. You know, and you know, most no, as this is page 63, you know, no human way leads from person to person, Bonhoeffer says. The most loving sensitivity, the most thoughtful psychology, the most natural openness do not really reach the other person. There are no psychic immediacies, again, to reiterate that. And that's so the connection is always through Christ, and there's no genuine gratitude for nation, family, history, and nature without a deep repentance that honors Christ alone above all these gifts. There is no genuine love for the world except the love which Christ showed us. And you know, and then Bonhoeffer goes on to kind of use Abraham as an example of someone who needed to be separated from what was so that he could walk into what is and gain a fuller understanding of who he was in relationship to the world. And so, you know, he goes, we won't go through it step by step unless people have particular questions, but you know, Abraham followed his father Terah away from Ur, the Chaldees. Then, you know, Terah died and Abraham moved on, but had to leave his ancestral home to do all of that. He had to leave behind what he had known to go to this place that he didn't know. And then Bonhoeffer goes on to say that it's through that that he now received even a greater inheritance or a greater connection or a greater family by first being separated from what was. And then he even goes into talking about the Akedah, or the, you know, the sacrifice of Isaac, that, you know, by being willing to be separated, he now has received Isaac back, but in a different way. And so for some of us, when we answer the call to Christ, we still have the relationships, or we're still connected in a community as we might have been before, but now it's in a new way. Now we see that our interactions with, you know, our family, we see our interactions with our community differently because we have been willing to be separated from them, or we've had that separating, you know, event that's happened in our connection with Jesus in that very individual and very solitary interaction. And you can see it with Paul too. You know, Paul had to leave, you know, all that he was as a Pharisee, you know, trained by Gamaliel, a Jew's Jew for lack of a better term, had to be willing to leave that. So now he had a greater inheritance or a greater connection with now both Jews and Gentiles that heard the gospel and wanted to know about Christ. You know, and so, as Jesus, says, when Peter says, we've left everything and followed you. And Jesus says, well, you're going to gain more than that. You're also going to gain persecutions because, not everybody's going to like the fact that you have chosen to follow me, but yet and still your call to follow now opens you up for an even greater connection, and you will have more than you could possibly imagine in terms of your connection with other people, in terms of your access, even to resources. But you have to be willing to focus solely on me, be willing to be separated, and you might, it might play out for you, and it's a very individual thing, and it's different for all of us. that, you know, that you remain in those relationships, but that you just see them in a different way. Then for other people, you know, it's a separation and a call to go in a different direction or to go elsewhere. And we see that with the saints, particularly with, excuse me, those desert mothers and fathers who felt a call to go to the desert, to be separated from people, but then ultimately realize that, okay, wait a minute, I still have a community, whether it was people coming out to talk to me about being related to God, or whether it was now other people of like minds were gathering together, and and monasteries began, convents began in that way. So we never really get away from the relationship, but our first relationship becomes our relationship with Christ. And then all of the other relationships, all of the other interactions are mediated through Christ. And even though they might appear from the outside, looking in the same, they're fundamentally different because again, they're mediated through Christ. Or we're seeing these relationships differently now that Christ is with us, and we're looking at it through Christ. Let's see. But at the bottom of 65, but it's not in our power to choose one of the other possibilities. It's not in our power as disciples to choose, oh, this is how I want it to go. This is how I want my call to look, or this is how I want to interact with people after I decide to follow Jesus. It's always according to the will of Jesus. We are called in whatever way. Um, to become present to God, or present to the world through Jesus in a way that is necessary for God. It's not about our particular will, needs, hopes, dreams, but it's about how we connect with God's will and what God has created us to do uniquely and specifically in the world, as followers. And so, we become part of an entirely new community. And Jesus stands at the center between the other person and me. He separates, but he also unites. He cuts off every direct path to someone else, but he guides everyone following him to the new and sole true way to the other person via the mediator. Um, and everyone enters discipleship alone, but no one remains alone in discipleship. Those who dare to become single individuals trusting the word are given the gift of church community. So it's the paradox of being willing to be separated, being willing to be an individual in the call that then opens us to a fuller connection with, sometimes with the same people that we were already in relationship with, and then also sometimes to expand it even more broadly than we could have imagined or thought possible. Right. So that kind of brings us to the end of chapter 5. So any other particular questions or comments about discipleship in the individual? So moving along into chapter 6, and again, chapter 6 makes up the largest portion of the book, or pretty close to the largest. It's definitely the longest chapter. Is Bonhoeffer's extended discussion of the Sermon on the Mount that really, whereas we started with, Bonhoeffer's discussion of cheap grace versus costly grace, and how costly grace was necessary for the church. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Burton.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to page 65, where you talk about it's not in our power to choose. Now, I was thinking, is that where the gifts of the Holy Spirit comes in, where each person is given a gift So that's how they use it. So we don't choose our gifts.
Hmm. I don't know. That's a good. I hadn't thought about it like that. Hmm. I mean, I think that yeah, that could be. Um, but again, it's it's it is also based on, again, as in all of this, on what God, how God has created us and what God needs from us. But yeah, that is a possible way to look at it. Mm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You have to think about that. Good point. Because when Paul talks about the gifts, they're given, for the sake of the ministry of the relationship within the community. So it's not an
Mhm.
individual choice so much as it
Right.
is. It's yeah, right. Yeah. So it's given to yeah, okay. Yeah, works. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Think of it. Okay, thank you. We'll click that a little more. Okay. Um, Yeah, so Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes so-called, we all have come in contact with them in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through our own study, through sermons, through Bible study, classes, Sunday school classes, even probably some of us having memorized them at some point in time. So this Sermon on the Mount, again, is very key to Bonhoeffer's understanding of discipleship. And at the beginning of chapter 6, it's very interesting how he kind of sets the stage for the sermon. He talks about the crowd and Jesus and the disciples, and how what the crowd sees, what Jesus sees, how the disciples are set apart, but also apart, and how the disciples' interaction with Jesus and then with people, being part of and separated from, has a powerful impact on on how they live out their call, and then also how they interact with the crowd, and how the crowd interacts with them. He starts out, Jesus on the mountain, the crowd, the disciples, and the crowd sees that Jesus and his disciples are there. But the crowd doesn't necessarily like the fact that this group has been separated from them, even though they're still a part of them, that Jesus has called them off to the side, or called them away, or set them aside, set them apart. And then disciples, they see, that they are part of this group. They've come from this group, and they're still their people. They've been called out, set apart, but they still know they're connected, and this is the people from which they came. Um, and and so even so they've given up who they were, or what they did, or how they interacted with people for the sake of Jesus. And now they're living, they're on page 70. They've given up everything in response to Jesus' call. Now they are living in renunciation and want. They're the poorest of the poor, the most tempted of the tempted, the hungriest of the hungry. They have only him. Yes, and with him they have nothing in the world, nothing at all, but have everything with God. So far, he has found only a small community, but it is a great community he is looking for when he looks at the people. Disciples and the people belong together. The disciples will be Jesus's messengers. They will find listeners and believers here and there. Nevertheless, there will be enmity between the disciples and the people until the end. Everyone's rage at God, God's word, and will come into view, will fall on his disciples, and they will be rejected with him. The cross comes into view. So now you have the conflict that happens when you make a choice to follow Jesus. Jesus calls you. Um, there is some tension there with the people that are still a part of the crowd, so to speak, that haven't been chosen or haven't answered. Now you as the disciple, you as the chosen or the called, the one that has answered the question with the affirmative, yes, I will follow you, now becomes a touchstone for all of the people's concerns. We see that in Moses. We see that in Jesus. We see that in Paul. We see it in David, Solomon, Samuel. All of these that were explicitly called into a leadership of this community, now are a touch point for all of the disappointments and the questions and the dissatisfaction. We see it, in after the Exodus with Moses. Anything that didn't go right, they come to Moses. Moses turns to God and says, I can't handle it. God turns to Moses and said, I don't know what you're going to do with your people. Let me just get rid of them. Moses says, no, they're still your people. They're my people. And all of this kind of back and forth. And so Bonhoeffer wants to be clear again, now here at the outset of chapter 6, that answering the call is not an easy, doesn't mean that the road's going to be easy. But that it's important and essential if we're going to stay in relationship with God. Yes, Ms. Wilson. Ms. Wilson.
Yes. Is Bonhoeffer saying that enmity was more on the side of the crowd, the people, or on the side of the disciples?
On the side of the people.
So there was some jealousy there between the two groups.
Mm-hmm.
And did they recognize that the people recognize, maybe they did, maybe the crowd or the people did not fully understand that these disciples, these followers, were truly following Jesus, following his word, his law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's possible, but I think kind of from Bonhoeffer's point of view, it's kind of that inevitable. I don't know. I don't want to put words in Bonhoeffer's mouth, but it's kind of like that. Oh, wait a minute. Why did you get to hang out with Jesus, or why are you over there, separated from us? Because you, what it's almost like what makes you special so special.
Yeah.
Versus me. I want to be with Jesus too. And then that kind of sets up this dichotomy that, again, for Bonhoeffer, there's that piece of the cross, that's that carrying of the cross that is essential to Jesus' work and to our work, and this is kind of part of the cross. This is how the cross comes in, this enmity between those that are our disciples that are called or probably more importantly have answered the call.
Right.
Those that haven't.
Yeah, they were really the purest, doing the purest form of discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
The disciples.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Right.
I do have a comment though.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Because the disciples that Jesus called, they were not perfect. And I think the crowd was trying to say, here, how can you be one of his disciples and you did A, B, and C? They were judging them.
Mm.
And yeah, because, for example, the tax collectors who he called, the fishermen, there wasn't such great character, but as you said, and Bonhoeffer is saying, it's a personal call, an individual call.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Right. Bonhoeffer is really saying that this group of people, the disciples, were really following the standards that Jesus set, but they were really not 100% what we call good citizens in every way.
Well, his disciples weren't our people because we were too busy looking at them for who they were.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So he got them tighter.
Mhm.
into the same situation, which made them they're his people, and then they turn around so that we could
Mhm.
look on them and say, well, we maybe could do that ourselves. Isn't that the calling?
Right. Yep. 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 Yeah.
Can't we say they were just ordinary people?
Mhm.
Uh-oh.
Yep. Yeah.
No, they were, but so was the crowd.
Yeah, well, I mean,
There was
you would think that the crowd were expecting Jesus to pick the
But why did
more
why did
affluent people,
why
Mm.
did Jesus choose these
the regular
12?
regular individuals.
Why did he separate these 12 people?
Mhm. Mhm. You know,
Their
I mean,
specialty. I mean, you don't think Peter was important? I mean, I can't fish. I
Well,
wouldn't know what
he
to do.
explained to them, this is
He-
what I'm expected of you.
Mm.
You
Peter
decide, are you going to follow me or not?
Mhm.
According to
Maybe-
Bonhoeffer, to be a disciple, that's my interpretation of what I read, that
Mhm.
you've got to be you have to not just believe, you have to act on your belief. They
Mhm.
should mirror each other.
Mhm.
And the disciples didn't do that in every way.
Mhm.
But did he really choose them? Because it said that they're from the crowd. They're from the same people that did not follow him.
Let him go.
He
They
chose
kept the
those
top.
disciples. No, he chose those 12, remember? I think.
He called them, yes.
Yeah, he called.
Right.
They were
He-
called, yes.
But the call is saying, "Follow me," and
Mhm.
they choose to follow him.
Right. Right.
Call.
But in following him, they gave up everything.
Right.
Their
Mhm.
worldly life.
And remember, some wanted to go back and take care of business
Mhm.
before they followed.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that this discussion is bringing up is that, when we read the Gospels, we kind of have this sanitized view that Jesus, called, approached these 12 people and they all said yes. But there also is another line here that there were other people that were asked or other people that wanted to be part, but they had an issue somewhere along the line, in
They
the
want to
last
all
chapter,
in.
I want to go back and take care of business, as Mr.
Yeah,
Hughes says, or
yeah.
I need to go back and bury my
Bury the
father. I need
dead,
to do this,
yes.
man. And so
These 12 were
and
all
Jesus
in.
says,
They
okay,
weren't half
right.
in, half out.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
But isn't it showing as well that God, Jesus chose then, but God chooses anybody from anywhere at any time, and He chooses who He chooses,
Mm-hmm.
and from any area of life, anywhere. And
Yep.
once you have been chosen by God, and you do what you're supposed to do, you carry out God's work.
Mm-hmm.
That in a way, it don't really matter what the rest of people that were on the same level as you think. You have a job to do.
Right. Yep.
But is
Yeah, but it
Bonhoeffer
doesn't make you superior to the ones that were not called.
No, you're neither
We have to always
superior nor
remember that.
inferior. Yeah, and
Exactly.
the others have to be sure to make sure that they don't
Mhm.
think of you, as
Lesser than.
inferior, that you shouldn't be there.
Mhm.
Lesser than. Mhm.
Right.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because the only real difference is that, that those 12, when Jesus came, they said, yeah, I'll go. And it, it wasn't, it wasn't anything for them to feel superior. But it also wasn't anything for anyone else to feel that they were inferior. It was just Jesus asked, and at that moment they said, yes, I'll go. And that's really the thing that's open for all of us. It's no particular
no
strength of
pedigree.
character. Right, exactly. It's just
Not about
okay, I'm gonna say yes. And I think it remains open. All of those people that were in the crowd that weren't the quote unquote disciples or apostles still had opportunities to follow. They're still, had the, and we know that there was a
individual thing.
large group of people that were disciples, that that did follow. Now, they weren't apostles, and we can, we go back and forth about, that and what that means, but ultimately, a number of people were called, a number of people answered the call, and a number of people now are moving along with Jesus. Bob Harvard gets a little bit more into kind of the discussion of the disciples versus, well, not even versus, but what is unique about them, I guess. But ultimately, as he's kind of laying it out before he gets, actually into the text of Matthew 5, or into the Sermon on the Mount, so called, he really wants us to be thinking, okay, there are greater dynamics going on than just Jesus standing up and saying, "Blessed are." There are real human interactions going on here. There are questions about, well, what is, who are they, and why are they being set apart? There are questions for the people that are there that I can't remember who mentioned. I think it was Miss Curtis. That now, oh, well, maybe I can do this too. Maybe when I have the opportunity, or or when Jesus asks me, then I'll be ready, because yeah, I know Peter. I grew up with Peter. I know who Peter is, and if Peter can do it, surely I can. Or yeah, Matthew's a tax collector, for God's sake. A tax collector really can follow Jesus? Well, a tax collector can follow Jesus. Surely I can. Or, there's a zealot, they're way out there, but Simon the Zealot, he said yes, and he could follow Jesus. Well, if Simon the Zealot can be called, can't I be as well? Can I say yes? Can I follow Jesus? And then, and women were a part of Jesus's disciples. And probably, in the society weren't included in that sort of way, but they said, well, if all of these other people can follow Jesus, why can't I? And then now you see that the community begins to grow in a way that probably wouldn't have been possible, maybe if Jesus had called some of the usual suspects or who would be expected. Yes, Ms. Caesar.
No, I just wanted to make an example based on what Manoffer is saying about individual. It's an individual thing, because I'm likening it to ministries in the church. People are called, asked to be a part of a ministry, and they have 1,000,001 excuses why they can't. And then the ones that say yes, those that had all the excuses want to know, how come you're there? How come you're doing that? And I think it can equate to I don't know if it's equate to the same thing, but I think like Manoffer said, it's an individual thing. It's a call, and the individual answer the call, regardless of their status or pedigree or anything like that. Yeah.
Right.
I think everyone was a follower, but the disciples were a carved out group, which they were the messengers, they were the evangelists. The general population they were followers, but they were not this core group who were teaching and performing miracles. Also, they were carved out to do, because they did things literally, and they believed, they had faith, and Jesus saw that, so he carved out this apostle group or disciple group.
Also, those that were called was willing to give up comfort and traditions to follow him.
Right.
Because he made it clear you have to give up certain things.
Right.
But have you noticed that they didn't depended on him hands and foot?
Right. Yeah.
If you notice who they were, they were not dependent children that he had to be worried about 24/7.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, because I think there is a uniqueness about these 12, but also there is a very common reality about them as well. And ultimately, as Bonhoeffer will go on to say, they are blessed. Just in the next couple paragraphs, and we'll get to that next week. They are blessed because they have been willing to be separated from what was. They were willing not simply to say yes, not simply to say, "Oh, I'll follow you wherever you go," as some of the others said, but were willing to get up not only when Jesus called, but also to be willing to be separated from, Peter, James, and John from the fishing nets, Matthew from his tax collector booth, Simon from the group of zealots, the others, whatever they were doing before, whatever connection they had before, they were willing to give them up for the sake of following Jesus wherever Jesus was going to go. And, and that really ultimately is the question for us all. If we are to be disciples of Christ, are we willing not only to say yes to following Christ, but to being willing to give up everything that we have been connected with before, everything that we would say makes us who we are, the history and the where we're from and the accolades and the things we do well, and the connections that we have, or whether the case is, are we willing and able to give those up for the sake of Christ? And then if we are, and we say yes to Christ, then we switch all of those alliances and allegiances. We give them away so that we can focus on Christ, and we might be reconnected with those, but then again, as in the last chapter, in a different way, in a fuller way. It's 8:00. Sorry. Sorry.
I'm not sure about it, but I think it's after
Frontline
8
is
o'clock.
coming on.
Yes.
It's after 8, I think.
It is. Well, my clock just hit 8, but in any case, yes. Thank you all.
This was wonderful tonight.
We'll meet again. Yes, thank you all very much. It's been a wonderful discussion as always. So thank you for your input and for being present, and we'll look forward to continuing the discussion on next week. All right. And Compline begins now. So welcome to all who are here for Compline.
Thank you.